All right, everybody, Terrence Popp here with another episode of Live from the Lair. Well, it's not so live, it's pre-recorded. Today, I'm going to go over a couple of ghost stories from individuals. Unfortunately, these ghost stories were relayed to me by sons and grandsons of the original individuals who experienced this. Okay, again, these are not mine. I'm just telling the story as it was told to me, and it's kind of crazy.
Are you the kind of person who's run out of feelings to hurt?
Yeah. Wah, wah, wah.
Wah.
Then we have the Redonkulas swag for you. And we have multiple locations where you can get it. Go to the Stream Elements store or Crypto Fashion and embrace your inner fat punisher. Because after all,
There's a little bad pop in all of us. Even your mother.
shirts, stickers, mugs, and hats are on sale now. Your support helps keep us independent from big tech and keeps this life-saving train on the tracks. Links are in the Meat Gazer box.
The first one, let's see what the guy's name is. All right, I believe last name Stormfellow, retired E7. This individual basically retired out of the Army in 1982, and he originally came in 1961. MOS infantry, and he wound up, getting transferred around and, was deployed to Vietnam with the 9th Infantry Division. Now, for those of you that are unfamiliar, I did a little research on this. The 9th Infantry Division conducted massive anti-insurgent operations in the Mekong Delta, meaning they were on patrol boats, and a lot of them, the QRF forces and actual main forces were deployed to many areas along the Mekong Delta, many islands. There was all kinds of crazy fighting that took place. Now, Stormfellow had a sergeant with him, and they called him Sergeant Sams. And he was explained to be excessively heavy on the trigger, meaning he was a shoot first and ask questions later kind of guy, and responsible for a lot of mayhem and incidents that may or may not have been legal. But, that was in Vietnam. It was a long time ago. And as someone who has deployed to war zones myself, things get crazy once the shooting starts. And you have no idea what that is going to do to you mentally down the road. Well, I do now, but, a lot of the younger guys, when they experience this, don't realize what they're doing has an impact on them later in life. And I talk about it in my book. The weapon you have will kill the enemy and you at the same time, so use it sparingly. Well, Sergeant Sams, basically in the military, people are put together and then people get reassigned, and then maybe sometimes they get reassigned to the same units. And it's actually fairly common for that to happen in the military. So down the road, when Stormfellow got his drill sergeant assignment, because that's usually how it used to work, when you got to a certain rank, you either became a recruiter or a drill sergeant for 2 to 3 years, and then after that, you were usually selected for the higher level NCO positions. And he got assigned down to Sand Hill, which no longer exists, is Fort Benning. And he was there for several months when, lo and behold, Sergeant Sams shows up to be a fellow drill sergeant alongside him in his company. And they got along quite well since they spent almost 2 years together in Vietnam, and when they were both assigned to the 9th Infantry Division. They both extended, so they stayed there beyond their year. That was fairly common, for a lot of units to stay together while they were, in Vietnam, because they worked so well, and they would usually try to leave at the same time, or if somebody extended, they would, try to hang out to help them out. And that was very common. But Sergeant Sams brought something back from Vietnam, and it was not good. Now, Stormfellow went on to explain how Sams would have, just vicious night terrors and was experiencing all kinds of mental distress. And Stormfellow basically chalked it up to PTSD and, maybe he developed a mental illness due to what he experienced in Vietnam. And back then, the mental health thing was not as prevalent as it is today. And a lot of times they just left people to their own devices. And Mr. Stormfellow believed that his men was one of his subordinates, Sergeant Sams, was having mental problems. Until one day, he came into the barracks because, Sergeant Sams was on duty that night, and he had gone home. It was his night off to spend with his family, and then Stormfellow decided, to come and check and see what's going on, since he was the head drill sergeant. And he walked into the room where the drill sergeant slept when they, stayed at the, with the troops. And they opened the door, and standing over Sergeant Sams, and he just saw this for just a few seconds, was a young Vietnamese little girl. And he literally saw the image, did this, saw the image, then watched it just fade away. And Sergeant Sams was having one of his night terror nightmares. So he kicks the bunk, and he asks Sergeant Sams, what's going on? You're having a nightmare. And, apparently they were having a discussion. And during that discussion, Stormfellow, said, hey, were you dreaming about some Vietnamese girl? And he saw Sergeant Sam's face go dead white. Because up until that point, Sergeant Sams had believed it was just nightmares that was tormenting him. But it was confirmed after Sergeant Stormfellow saw Sams and saw the spirit standing over him, or ghost, or whatever it is. They realized that Sergeant Sams was haunted. Apparently, he worked the trigger a little too hard, and some people that he put under took exception to that and haunted that motherfucker. And Stormfellow goes on to say that Sergeant Sams retired, and basically he heard, I think it was 3 years after his retirement, that Sams had hung himself. And left a note behind stating that he couldn't deal with it anymore, and he was tired of running from these ghosts that were ruining his life. And that's pretty much how that ended. And it's very rare to have two individuals see the exact same shit. All right. I mean, that is usually when that happens, it's a pretty powerful haunting. It's one thing for one individual to see an apparition, but it's a whole other animal when 2 or 3 people or more see it, and if it gets filmed. And I mean, that's pretty much how that one went. Now, Sergeant Stormfellow's passed away, and this particular ghost story was sent in, I think, about 3 years ago by his grandson. And I just thought I would tell it here today because, you know, these are just ordinary people doing ordinary shit. And sometimes they go through extraordinary circumstances and they have to do the absolute unimaginable. And that's later on, that becomes a very heavy weight to carry. And it wound up killing this guy down the road. Just saying. All right, next one. All right, now this one is from a Tim Jones, again, a grandfather who had, you know, passed away. This is from his grandson. All right, now this individual got out of the military as an E6, and he served from 1970 to 1975 in the 1st Infantry Division. And he was lucky enough to avoid getting, you know, sent to Vietnam. All right. Now, typically back then, during an active war, you know, you enlisted. Your first duty station was the war zone. Not him. He was a supply sergeant and very good at his job. So, you know, those guys are few and far between. So the chain of command basically protected him and moved him to two different units during his enlistment so he can do his job. And one of his specialities was dealing with combat losses and then writing up explanations in regards to the combat losses. Because from the story that was told, his father fell in on just a mountain of paperwork in regards to the unit's combat losses that had taken place while it was in Vietnam. And it took him almost 3 years to unfuck that whole knot roll of bureaucratic nightmare. So after, he ETS'd out of the military, he was at Fort Riley, Kansas, and he goes back home to Wisconsin and starts a construction business of his own. Basically, I mean, that's fairly common for dudes back then to get off, active service and start their own businesses, which this guy did. And since he was a veteran, he wound up getting pretty good contracts with the Army Reserves and the National Guard in Wisconsin. And many of these contracts took place on Fort McCoy. Now, Fort McCoy has been around since like 1900s, 1905-ish, when they came up with the plan, what they were going to do. And they spent like 4 years acquiring property. And I believe in 1909, they had enough to make it an actual training facility. That's pretty much all of the history I know on Fort McCoy in regards to that. Now, during Mr. Jones's, career, he worked on Fort McCoy on and off between 1975 and 1985. And during that time, he put in windows, replaced roofs, redid the heating and the ducts and so forth in these old World War II barracks. Some of them were World War I barracks, converted to World War, upgraded to the technology of World War II. And there were many of these buildings on Fort McCoy because Fort McCoy trained a lot of guys to go to, pretty much all of the war zones since the First World War. And during this time, Mr. Jones had explained to his grandson all of the crazy, fucked up shit that he saw on Fort McCoy. First story that he told his grandson was, Mr. Jones was tearing out windows with, I think he had a half a dozen of his workers with him. And everything was going smoothly. And then they ended for the day. They went home. The next day they came back and he only had 2 people. And he was trying to figure out where his other people were, why they weren't showing up, asked some questions. Well, apparently the individuals had seen some crazy ass shit in the barracks and decided, fuck it, I'm not working that job. All right. Now, these are grown-ass men from the 70s. These aren't like the soy boys of today that whine and cry when they stub their toe or get a hangnail. So he took it serious. And he decided, he would go back to the job site, and he himself would work on the inside, replacing these windows. And while he was in there, one of the NCO doors at the back of the barracks slammed. Now, it's fairly common. You leave a window open for a door to slam. Not when it slams 3 times in a row. So he's literally, shimming this window to make it level. And to his right, it's boom, boom, boom. He immediately walks to that area. Nothing in that room. No one in the building other than him and his two individuals assisting on the inside. And they're getting wigged out. All right. I mean, they're having serious problems. Well, he finished the job on that particular barracks. And he was contacted, I think, 2 other times to come back and do additional work on that particular building. He declined because, if you have 2/3 of your crew saying, fuck it, I'm going to quit if you make me work there. There it is. Now, he did go and work at other barracks on McCoy. And about two other times, he really saw some crazy ass shit. In one building, he saw a man with a towel around his waist come down from the stairs upstairs. And he turned and saw this guy, and he looked as real can be. He comes down, he button hooks into the bathroom where the showers are. Well, Mr. Jones immediately walks back there to find out what the fuck is going on because he's working on this building. Nobody in there. Nobody. And he remained quiet. He didn't say nothing because he didn't want to scare his crew because they were there basically to fix some of the concrete flooring in that bathroom that he was just working on, or he just saw that guy walk into. And he didn't want, them to take off because he needed the jackhammer to tear up some of the concrete and then level the floor and redrain it. That happens. And then from 1979-ish, 1981 to 1985, Fort McCoy tore down most of the World War II barracks. All right, so, and while he was tearing down some of these barracks, he encountered all kinds of disembodied voices. On one instance, he literally got there at 5:30 in the morning. The sun was coming up roughly 6:15. He was waiting on his crew. And he could hear platoons of men running by on one of the nearby roads, singing cadence, and there was no one there. Like literally, he was on this roof looking down. He could hear the cadence, and it was literally, the guy's double time running. You could hear the feet. You could hear, the murmurings and the yelling of people as they just ran by the building. He heard all of the shit. He saw nothing. And towards the end of all of the contracts that he had done on Fort McCoy, again, this was another teardown. And on this particular one, his crew literally walked off the site. All right, they're basically ripping off the siding. They had tore off the roof, and they were disposing of that. And he had 6 guys doing this particular job. And on 2 occasions, they saw a man literally poke his head around the corner looking at these guys. This is the middle of the day. Middle of the day. And then go around the corner. And these 6 guys tore it, went around there looking for this dude. They found nothing. And it wigged them out. It happened again about 2 hours later. They literally put their tools back in their vehicles and fucking left. He literally had to hire a whole other crew to come in and take care of it because his normal guys had had enough. 10 fucking years of seeing crazy shit on Fort McCoy. All right. Now, I myself have been on Fort McCoy on 3 different occasions. Twice for schools, and once I went there for a joint training exercise. I myself got a lot of creepy feelings when you'd walk around that base because most of those World War II barracks are gone. It's just the network of roads that are, they're labeled. And, I remember doing PT and running down those roads, and I'd run across some areas, you could see where the buildings used to be. And I literally felt like I had 1,000 eyeballs on me as I, ran down the road. I thought that was pretty creepy. And who knows what's going on? I mean, schools are haunted. And it turns out a lot of the military installations are also haunted. Who knew? Anyway, that's a couple of ghost stories from an old grunt such as myself. And you guys take it easy.